Hi, this is Michael William Denny of ThunderShamanism.com, and today we're going to be talking to you about another chapter in the book, The Thunder Wizard Path. And this was my second published book, really, but for the most part, it was my first book. And so I'm not going to go into exactly what I say into each chapter. I'm going to talk about it and just give some of my thoughts. And a lot of my thoughts have evolved since then, so I'll be sharing that. Feel free to watch some of the other videos earlier in this series, and click on Thunder Shamanism. If you're not familiar with my work, you can see all the kind of books and stuff and things that I have. So this is a really interesting chapter. Again, it's really important you understand where I'm coming from. And there are some people that can't wrap their heads around this, and this is, people who can't think in 3 dimensions. Maybe they got other issues and agendas that get in the way of it. But what I'm all about is showing that you can be true to your ethnic shamanic heritage, to your ancestors, and be a part of that and connect with that and stimulate those fibers of your DNA that are connected to that, to our ancient shamanic heritage. And also be universally connected to other paths that are coming from the same thing. Listen, there's science, gravity works everywhere in the world. You go to Africa and drop a rock on your foot, it's going to hurt. You go to Europe and drop a rock on your foot, it's going to hurt. It doesn't matter where you go, gravity is the same. And so the same thing is true with spirituality and spiritual principles and energetic principles. And we could debate at what point which spirits are only in this part of the world. But when it comes to, the general aspects of the things, we're talking about a science here. And each culture has its own take on things and has its own mastery and its own understanding. So that's what we're going to talk about here. And when I came to understand this, I tell you, it was orgasmic for me to have this powerful connection of the root power and connection from all spiritual practices. So the Hopi myth is one of those. The Hopi myth, and now again, I'm not Native American, I don't speak for Hopis, I can only tell you what has been publicly revealed, which, by Native Americans who claim that this is the Hopi myth. So here's how the Hopi myth goes. It says that sometime in the distant past, human beings were all one tribe. And at one point, the Great Spirit, whatever that means to you, came to the tribe of humans and said, I'm going to send you off into different parts of the world in order to master 4 elements. And so those that went, let me see if I get this right, those that went east mastered what I would call ether. Those that went north were to master fire. Those that went west were to master water, and those that went south were meant to master earth. Now, some people have used this as a way to put where the elements are in the directions, but you have to understand that that's not how, you can't connect the directions and the elements with this myth. But this myth does say, in a very succinct way, which direction people went to, but you have to look at it. So let's look at it first. So obviously the East Asians are the ones that mastered ether, or, in this myth, wind, which really means ether. And those that went south, mastered earth, are the Native Americans. Those that went west mastered water, which are the Africans. And those that went north are the Europeans, and which mastered fire. Now, the reality is that everybody came from Africa, so that first tribe of people would have been those Paleolithic first humans which came out of Africa. And so whether or not, some entity spoke to those first humans, or whether or not this is symbolic of what was going to happen, doesn't really matter to me. The truth of the essence of the myth is still the same. So when you look at it, if you're already, boom, in Africa, first human beings originated in Southeast Africa. That's where the first humans originated. So For those that are going to stay and populate the continent of Africa, there's really only one direction to go, which is west. So that's why the Africans went west to master water. Now, what does water do? Water penetrates. Water gets into everything. You can't really, you can try and keep water out for a while, but eventually you can't do it. And the Africans mastered rhythm, and everybody has rhythm. There's rhythm everywhere. You have that same kind of like shamanic beat, dun 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 dun, in every tradition, right? But the Africans took it one step further, and I know this from personal experience because I trained in Yoruba shamanic drumming, and I can tell you that the level of complexity that came to the rhythm involved in those rhythms is beyond anything that I've ever experienced. And if you ever really look at it in depth, you'll know what I'm talking about. Most of the time when you're hearing African rhythms, it sounds like a jumble and you don't know what you're listening to. But once you can pick out the rhythms, the complexity is unbelievable. This is the power of water of rhythm. And specifically the Yoruba people, I can't speak for anybody else, but the Yoruba people, when they speak their language, it sounds like water. It sounds like, and you can say the same word and change the inflection, and it'll change the word entirely. The same exact string of syllables, you change the inflection, it's a different word. That's water. Water flows up and water flows down. And what is, when it comes to music, anywhere in the modern world, any place in the world that has connection to radio, you have music that has been heavily influenced and inspired by African music. So even though, the African people were enslaved and taken to different parts of the world, they brought with them their music, and their music infused into that culture like water. You can't avoid it. So all of our music is based on that. So that's the power of water, and that's the power of the Africans, and that's what they give us. Those are the motherland, Africa, where we all came from. So they went west, and there's only one way to go from Southeast Africa, really, is just basically west. So what about the East Asians? They went east. Well, that makes perfect sense. You go north and east, boom, you hit China. There you go. So that's pretty understandable. But what about the Native Americans? Native Americans are said to have gone south. Well, that's kind of weird because you're starting from Southeast Africa. But, the way things worked is like the Asians and the Europeans, the Native Americans went in the same route. They went north, and then they went east, and then they went really far north, and then they crossed that bridge into Alaska. Now, once you get into Alaska, there's only one direction to go, and that's south. And so they went and populated both North and South America. So in terms of their journey, their southern journey was probably the longest one. So that's why they're connected with the South, and that's where Earth is for them. And the Europeans, obvious, going north. They pretty much went straight north from Africa, right up into Northern Europe. And they were meant to master fire. So it's interesting because the Northern Europeans spent probably the longest time and were probably the most deeply entrenched in the ice ages of all of the other races. And so we're talking about them specifically, the Europeans. Now, the reason why I have white skin is one major reason, which was because my African ancestors, when they got to Europe, it was very cold, and it was, they're in the grips, in the small little, pause between ice ages, and then ice ages hit for 40,000 years. So just in order to survive, to get enough, create enough vitamin D in the skin, you got to get rid of all of that that pigment, so that if you only got this much of your body getting sunlight, right, you got to be able to absorb vitamin D. So that's why my skin is white, because my ancestors lived in ice age conditions for 40,000 years. The other slight possibility is that we interbred with the Neanderthals. Anybody north of Africa has anywhere from 2 to 4% Neanderthal DNA in them. Now, The Neanderthals, we know, had the gene for light eyes, light skin, and red hair. So they were in Ice Age conditions for much longer than modern humans. They were in Ice Age conditions for something like 200,000 years, 250,000 years. So of course their skin was white. They were living in that all the time. So it's very likely that Northern Europeans got, their light eyes and light hair and light skin from the Neanderthals, and it was just an evolutionary tactic because, that works best when you live there. So that's why we look the way that we do. Now, why did we master fire? We mastered fire because what is it you need most when you're living in ice? You need fire. You need warmth. And in the runes, you have the one rune which is Nauthiz, which is this one, which means need fire. And what is this? This is two sticks rubbed together. This goes all the way back to Paleolithic times. Even in the runes, it shows us that our ancestors were Paleolithic people who had to figure out a way to create fire to stay warm, and it means to invent. Nauthiz is the rune of invention. When you're stuck and you need something, you got to figure out a way. You invent things. And so our ancestors invented multiple ways to create fire. Whether it's with rubbing two stones together or two sticks together, it doesn't matter. It's that friction that creates the fire. So what's so interesting to me about that is that the Hopis have this myth. Now, there's one thing in that myth which we can also find in the myths of our ancestors, which is the Hopis talk about this, there being writings on golden tablets, I believe. Writings on golden tablets talking about, the end of the world and all that kind of stuff. And we have that in our myths too. If you get to the end of the Voluspa, it talks about the writings that are buried on tablets. I mean, the same thing. So what does that mean? Did Native Americans, cross the Atlantic and go talk to some Icelandic guy and they came up with the same myth? Probably not. It's probable that this is both coming from a root tradition which may go all the way back to the first human beings 50,000 years ago. Let that blow your mind. I know that's a lot of people, most people just can't handle that. But I mean, we know that, we still have two arms and two legs and two eyes and two nostrils and a mouth and two ears, and we got that from our ancestors, hundreds of thousands and millions of years ago. Why is it impossible for us to hold on to this understanding, of our spiritual genesis? Why is this impossible for us to think of? Common sense says that if we're finding the same thing in multiple places and there's very little chance of them having got together in, times, over the past few thousand years, then it probably comes from an older tradition that goes even farther back. So this is a really great tradition that just excites me to no end, and specifically fire. Now, the northern people are fire people. Now, according to the Hopi myth, it says that that for the Native Americans, that the fire people were coming. They knew that the Europeans were coming, and if they came with a symbol of a cross within a circle, then they remembered who they were, and it was going to be a uniting of two great cultures that would create this wonderful society and civilization. But if the fire people showed up with a cross outside of a circle, stay the hell away from them, because they are going to cause you so many problems. They're going to steal your land and all kinds of other stuff. So sure enough, first time that people in the Southwest, they see a European, guess what? It's a Spanish conquistador with a cross, with no circle. And they knew, oh crap, here it comes. So interestingly enough, the Hopi people, of all the people in North America, at least to my knowledge, are the only tribe that wasn't kicked off their land. They're still living on their same land that they had before the white man came. And among all of the Native Americans, they look to the Hopi as the elders, as the people who hold on to the oldest traditions. And so they're very respected by that. So that's just some fun, interesting stuff. This is about the Hopi myth and the Northern Fire people. So once again, I'm recommending you get Celestial Qigong. If you really want to get some real power into your shamanic training, I suggest that you get that. If you want to work with me, you really want to master this, at some point you're going to have to work with me on a one-on-one basis. There's no way around it. So I suggest apprenticeship, and the time is growing shorter as more and more people sign up. I have less and less time to deal with people on a personal basis, so I suggest, if you're thinking about it, don't wait. Do it now while you have it. Listen, you can cancel anytime. You go 1 month at a time. And those that sign up as apprentices, I tallied it up, you get over $3,000 worth of other materials like DVDs and books and astrological charts and readings and things like that. So just even if you were an apprentice for a few months, you're going to get, tons of stuff. You're going to end up saving money in the long run. So there's that. So until next time, my friends, that's all for now.